Good evening and welcome back to the Unforced Error for the penultimate show on the Australian Open. We have the semi-finals finished and it is now officially final time. There's two players left in both sides and we're in for two cracking finals now, and it's all come to a fore now. The kind of everything else will soon be put aside, and it's time for the two main events. So we'll have a quick look back at the four semi-finals, and we'll have a quick preview of the final then. So we're 10 to 6 here in Ireland, so it's the early hours in Melbourne. So both finals are going on the ninth session in Melbourne, which is from about 8:30 here in Ireland, and depending on where you are, you'll have to check the time. So some people will be having it with their breakfast and some people will be having it with their dinner, but these two games I really believe are both set up nicely and can't be missed no matter what meal of the day you're on. So if we go for the women's semi-finals first, Rybakina beat Victoria Azarenka in a great game. Rybakina, we talked about the last day, Azarenka needing to get into those kind of longer rallies or whatever, but Rybakina's serve and first few shots, and Azarenka did talk about this in her press, it was the first two shots in particular that she couldn't quite defend as well as she liked, because often, when someone has a really strong serve, as Rybakina does, often it's the second shot that's actually the hardest to get, because often players at a certain level will be able to return it, so you can't hit an ace all the time, but it's then it's the positioning of the second and the third shot. You always kind of feel like you're behind. Now, she was under a bit of pressure in the tiebreak in the first set. It wasn't clean sailing, and Azarenka played very, very, it was a good quality game, and it was tighter than it probably looked, especially in the first set. Azarenka was quite raw in the press conference after, as it's very difficult to come directly off a court after losing a Grand Slam semi-final. It was, she knew herself kind of why she didn't win, and she was quite philosophical and will take the time and reflect, and we'll see a lot of her this year. It's great to see her back. She won this about 10 years ago now, and is at the latter stages of her career, and has put on an amazing show. And as I said before, she's on tennis council, she's done so much for this sport, and a very, very cool woman. So she was asked in the press conference as well. There's the same with Djokovic, and there's stuff going on outside the court, so to speak. There's been protests and a lot of stuff going around on social media, but I'm going to stick to the tennis. All that stuff is not my forte, but it's just those are things that players are being asked about. I don't know if it's annoying them or affecting their game. I'm not sure, but we're just going to break down the tennis here, if that's okay. So Rybakina, was very strong, used her serve, and will probably favour her chances in the final purely because she won Wimbledon last year. There was when she was under pressure in the first set, she did find a way, but there was panic there. There was a moment of her, and her coach was kind of talking to her. Her coach was quite animated at the side as well. So that's just something to be aware of going into the final. And but it sets up a great final. And Aryna Sabalenka beats Linette. And I can't tell you how happy I am to see this woman finally make it into a Grand Slam. Linette was brilliant and has been brilliant all tournament. She felt as well that she didn't do too much wrong, and that's very much the case. It was Sabalenka played well, Linette did not play bad at all. She talked about, which was wonderful to hear, that she's finally in these type games deep in Grand Slams and feels like she belongs, and she absolutely does. And as I said, she's somewhere at the later point of her career. Some players like Garcia is another example who really have blossomed, in their late 20s or so. Not that that's old or anything, but, so many players burst onto the scene early, but this has had the opposite effect. So she's going to grow in confidence from this. and her game, the type of players that she's beaten, will give her a lot of confidence going forward. So it's great to see her. She was a great story. And I think this is someone who's played I think this is her like 30th Grand Slam, and she's never gotten this far. So this is a great story, and hopefully it'll give her that belief that she can go all the way. And it's great to see someone who's been trying so much over years, never gave up, and has kept pushing through. And speaking of that, you could say the exact same for Sabalenka. She's a younger woman. She's been in a couple of semi-finals, a lot of heartbreaking loss, and she's finally broken through to the final. So it's very exciting. But she talked, again, a very understated celebration at the end, talked about in the press conference that she's one more game to go, so there's no point in celebrating too much. And yeah, another constrained performance, but her serve was amazing. And she used the lines very well, movement very good. So we've got two big hitters now in the final. I think it's going to be absolutely amazing final. And I know I said it at the first video, I'm very biased towards Sabalenka. I just, she's such a tough and courageous player. And then, off the court when she's been interviewed, such a bubbly character, so open and so friendly. And I just think she's a great character, and her brand of tennis is great. We talked a lot about her and herself as well, becoming more boring and trying to dampen those emotions, but she certainly does not play boring tennis. You could not say that honestly at all. Through all her struggles last year with her serve and missing semi-finals, she was asked about, the use of psychologists. I mean, most players now will have a psychologist on their team, or a mental coach, so to speak. And she said she doesn't. She did, but she doesn't anymore. She knows herself what she's got to do. She knows she's really learning to kind of deal with her emotions and recognize different things. So it's a wonderful progression for her. Now, can she win against Rybakina? I think she has what it takes, but so does Rybakina. Both players can beat each other, and it's all about power. We talk about the danger in terms of playing Azarenka. Rybakina's first serve and her kind of follow-up shots. Sabalenka's got a lot of power. If she can return the serve, at as strong a pace as she can, she's got every chance. If she can make the points longer, it may actually suit her. And that, you wouldn't usually say that about a big hitter. They'd like to just bang it out as quickly as they can. So the first few games will be cagey. Rybakina's been in a Grand Slam and won a Grand Slam final before, so you can't underestimate how powerful that will be. But Sabalenka's a different player than she was. She's mentally she seems more confident in herself, and even though she's not been to a final before, she's been to a lot of semi-finals. This stage in the tournament is not alien to her, so it'll be a fascinating final tomorrow morning at 8:30. So no lie-in this weekend, but again, we'll know a lot early. Sabalenka needs to settle into it early if she's going to win. If one set gets away from you, it's very hard to come back, and grow into the game. So if she really needs to focus on settling in as early as she can. Easier said than done in a Grand Slam final, of course. But it's going to be an absolutely amazing final. I really believe the best two players are sitting here, and an absolute exhibition of power are the things to watch out for. On the men's side then, Stefanos Tsitsipas, the big Greek man, beat Khachanov in 4 sets. And again, similar to Sabalenka, one he's been in a Grand Slam final before, hasn't won. He's a different player now. He seems to have a different perspective, and about the same age. He's in his mid-20s as well, but it's been around a long time. And talking about being positive, thinking about things in a positive nature towards his tennis, and seems to be very at peace with what he's doing and the way he's playing. So that's exciting. These are two players we know well, but are probably seeing a different side to, or a development to, as well. And he talks about, doing this for Greece, and he's looking like a different player in mind and in body. If he can Djokovic, he'll play Djokovic, who beat Tommy Paul. I'll talk about that in a sec. if he can kind of slowly get into it and kind of not poke the bear and go about his business as he has been doing, I really think he's got a good chance here. I know Djokovic is the favourite, and he's been the favourite from the start, and we haven't had a lot of evidence to suggest otherwise, other than the hamstring earlier in the tournament. He doesn't seem to be suffering with that too much. But sooner to Sabalenka, it's great to see a guy knocking on the door and finally getting through. Kashanov will be back. He says he's ended on a much kind of higher note for a losing semi-final. He was able to have perspective pretty early after and say, look, I love the sport and I'm going to keep knocking on the door. So great to see that. And a great game as well. A very tight and high quality game. And then Novak beat Tommy Paul, and it was the backhand and his defense that did it. He's near impossible to play at times, and Tommy Paul was probably tired after the Shelton game. But Tommy Paul's been on an amazing run, and these group of Americans now, if they can push on each other going into the future now, will be very exciting. So Tsitsipas Novak final Sunday morning. It's going to be very exciting. Greece versus Serbia, those two very passionate fan bases. And the atmosphere will be really interesting to see. Will there be, because both players have probably been favoured in their both games, because there's a lot of Serbian fans, a lot of Greece fans. So it should be an amazing atmosphere. And as I said, I think Tsitsipas will get chances. It'll be a game of momentum. I think in a 5-set or best of 5 sets, you do get chances. And I think if Tsitsipas can go about his business without trying to provoke Djokovic, I think if he gets in a dogfight or the longer games, it'll favour Djokovic. So I think Tsitsipas does have what it takes. I give him a much better chance than the odds currently do. But I think he has to go about his business and as quietly and as calmly as he can. And yeah, interesting to see the crowd. Also, the number 1 seed is at stake here as well. I don't think that's as important to the players as we might think. Djokovic is going for his 22nd Grand Slam. That's more important to him, I think, than the number 1 seed. And Tsitsipas, he talked about in the press conference, like growing up, meeting up with his friends and watching the Australian final. He wasn't watching the rankings, he was watching the final. You know what I mean? So I think being here and winning is all that matters. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, because we've got to go and get some rest and get some build up. And hope you enjoy the finals, and hopefully they'll cap off a great tournament. And as I said, we should be expecting 2 great games, and anyone can win any of the finals. But watch out for Belarusian women and Greek men and everything in between. All right, see you soon.